9. Crash spacecraft. The British billionaire and Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson started his company with the vision of someday turning the sci-fi idea of space tourism into a reality. Part of making his vision come true involves designing and building experimental spacecraft, which can be a long trial-and-error purchase with tragic results. Branson and his colleagues learned this lesson the hard way in 2014, when one of their prototypes, rocket VSS Enterprise, catastrophically broke up in midair during a test flight over the Mojave Desert. The accident happened 11 seconds after the rocket was dropped from its carrier aircraft. It blew apart into pieces, leaving a 35-mile-long trail of debris across the desert floor. Pilot Peter Seibold survived the explosion with serious injuries, while his co-pilot Michael Olsbury died in the crash. Investigators found the engine intact, ruling it out as the cause of the crash. The National Transportation Safety Board ultimately concluded that Olsbury prematurely unlocked an air brake device for re-entering the atmosphere. In its final report, the agency blamed inadequate safeguards, insufficient pilot training, and lack of Federal Aviation Administration oversight for the accident. Branson has continued his quest to turn space travel into a recreational activity for the public. He had a close call himself back in 2021, when an experimental spacecraft he was riding veered off course. Virgin Galactic has been banned from performing any more test flights until the results of an FAA investigation are released. 8. Prehistoric Reef. Southern Australia's 76,000 square mile Nullarbor Plain is part of 18% of the country classified as desert. It's flat, dry, and extremely hot. But the region looked much different 14 million years ago, when it was covered by a lush tropical ocean, and in 2022, researchers from Curtin University in Perth found evidence that it was once home to a thriving and colorful coral reef. They made the discovery while examining satellite imagery of the region and noticing a bullseye-like formation, which they identified as the remnants of some kind of seabed structure. It's the first formation of its kind ever seen on the Nullarbor Plain, challenging previously held beliefs that the area has always been barren. The ring-shaped structure measures between 3,950 and 4,250 feet in diameter. It's completely unique from anything else found on the Nullarbor Plain, and the area's modern geological processes can't explain the reasons behind its existence. Geologist Milo Borum described how the team observed evidence of the channels of long-vanished rivers, as well as sand dune systems imprinted directly into limestone. The Nullarbor Plain is just one of several areas of Australia that are now covered in desert, but once contained seas and rainforests for millions of years. Experts hope that by taking a closer look at these regions, they can learn a lot more about the beginnings of both Earth and our solar system. 7. Ancient burials. In 2005, while searching for dinosaur fossils in the Sahara Desert in Niger, University of Chicago researcher Paul Sereno and his colleagues came across the bones of a woman and 2 children who died embracing each other. More skeleton discoveries followed as the team dug in what turned out to be an ancient cemetery filled with nearly 200 ancient human graves. They also found the fragments of large fish, crocodiles, and other animals that aren't found in the desert, leading them to think that the burials most likely date back to one of the Sahara's green periods. The researchers narrowed the remains to 2 distinct groups of people and 2 possible time periods. The first group, known as the Kifian, colonized the area about 10 to 8,000 years ago. It was one of the wettest and greenest times in the Sahara's history, known as the African Humid Period. The Kifian people were tall, with some adults standing more than 6 feet high. They were skilled hunters and spearfishers who ate wild animals and large fish, which they caught in a dried-up lake that no longer exists. One man's leg bone contained ridges that were indicative of him having massive muscles, suggesting that the population was healthy and enjoyed an ample protein-filled diet. The Tanarians, who lived in the region between 7,000 and 4,500 years ago, were smaller than the Kifians. They had a mixed economy full of hunting, fishing, and cattle herding, and they often buried their dead with jewelry and ritual poses. An analysis of the first grave Sereno's team found showed traces of pollen, indicating that the mother and her 2 children were buried on a bed of flowers. Other burials had a young woman with an armband carved out of a hippo tusk, a man sitting on a turtle shell, and a man's skull sitting on a clay vessel. It's hard to imagine a time when such an inhospitable desert had water and abundant plant life, but the Sahara has experienced many green periods over the years, thanks to the annual monsoons that once fell in the northern region. The Kiphian and Tanarian people both lived during lush periods, which were punctuated by dry periods in between. They were biologically distinct groups who were unrelated to one another, lived very different lifestyles and at different times, but they buried their dead in the same place. 6. Fukang Meteorite. In 2000, a Chinese hiker found a massive rock full of unique golden crystals in the Gobi Desert. He harvested a 44-pound sample from it, but it didn't get much attention until 5 years later when it was featured in the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show. The stone caught the eye of a University of Arizona professor named Dante Loretta. He and several colleagues investigated the specimen and determined that it was a meteorite that slammed into the ground 4.5 billion years ago in China's Jiangxing province. The team named it the Fukang Meteorite. It belonged to a group of space rocks called pallasites, which make up less than 1% of the meteorites found on Earth. The Fukang meteorite is made of silvery nickel, iron, and olivine crystals, which researchers say look like relics of forming planets. After its discovery, it was cut up into pieces. Given its rarity, the rock is extremely valuable, with just 1 gram selling for as much as $30. The largest piece, weighing 925 pounds, went up for auction at Bonhams, New York back in 2008, with the expectation that it would fetch about $2.1 million, but it failed to sell at all. The Fukang meteorite is considered the shiniest pallasite ever found, but the largest similar sample in existence weighs 1,400 pounds and was found in Kansas by a space rock hunter named Steve Arnold in 2005. 5. A secret military base. Deep in the central Australian outback near Alice Springs, there's a satellite surveillance base named Pine Gap. Jointly operated by American and Australian intelligence groups, some of which include the United States Central Intelligence Agency, the US National Security Agency, and the US National Reconnaissance Office. More than 800 employees work at the site, which houses a massive computer that controls American spy satellites as they pass over areas spanning roughly 1/3 of the Earth, including the Middle East, China, and Russia's Asian regions. The exact nature of operations at Pine Gap have always been kept secret, which is one reason why it was built out in the middle of nowhere. It's also too remote for spy ships to intercept its signals, making the location strategically very significant. Pine Gap's intelligence-gathering satellites are used for detecting airstrikes, nuclear weapons, and other military and intelligence points. The base is considered critical to both national and global security. In 2018, Netflix and ABC aired a 6-part political drama called Pine Gap about the site. While the storyline is considered fictional, the show is allegedly based on insider information from NSA veteran David Rosenberg, who worked at Pine Gap for over 18 years, from 1990 to 2008. This is probably as close as anyone could hope to knowing what really goes on at the secretive clandestine site. 4. Prehistoric human footprints. Over 12,000 years ago, some of North America's first human inhabitants walked barefoot by a riverbed in what is now northern Utah. When the group passed through the area, the Earth was just coming out of the last ice age and was thawing after being mostly frozen for thousands of years. Today, the region is mostly made of desert, and the riverbed the early people walked on is completely dried up. The marshland that once surrounded it has also transformed and is barren. The group left behind dozens of footprints, which went unnoticed until 2022, when researchers Darren Duke and Thomas Urban drove through the site searching for evidence of prehistoric campfires. Ironically, they were discussing what they thought ancient footprints might look like if they ever found some, when Urban pointed out the car window at what looked like one. Duke told CBS News that the prints vary between discolored patches on the ground and imprints that clearly resemble footprints. The researchers spent several days investigating and identified 88 prints total. It seems like the people who left them behind were walking in shallow water and mud, according to Duke, who explained that once they lifted their foot off the ground, each print was quickly filled with sand, leaving them preserved for modern times. 3. A salt lake. Nestled at the foot of the Andes Mountains to the east of the Cordillera de Domeyko mountain range to its west, the Salar de Atacama is Chile's largest salt flat. It spans a 62 by 50 mile area, making it the world's third largest flat after the Salinas Grandes in Argentina and the El Salar de Uyuni found in Bolivia. Sitting at more than 7,500 feet above sea level, the Salar de Atacama looks more like the moon than something from Earth. It's surrounded by active volcanoes that have made a plain filled with jagged brown and yellow salt deposits that look like pieces of dead coral. There are also several lagoons filled with extremely salty water. Many of them are frequently visited by flamingos, including Laguna Chaxa. One of the most popular places for tourists to swim, or rather float, is in Laguna Seja, which has a higher salt concentration than the Dead Sea. And it's rumored that the world's most beautiful sunset can be found at Laguna Tebinquinche, where the salt content reflects the sun's rays, displaying a spectacular array of pink shades on the water's surface. 2. Human Bone Hoard. In the Saudi Arabian desert, there's a network of tunnels formed by previous volcanic activity known as the Jirsan lava tube system. Scientists started investigating the site in 2007, but it wasn't until 2021 that they ventured far enough inside to see thousands of ancient bones belonging to at least 14 species of cattle, goats, horses, camels, rodents, and even humans. They analyzed almost 2,000 of the bones, which date between 490 and 6,900 years old. 2 partial human skulls and bones with distinct markings were telltale signs that for nearly 7,000 years, the site functioned as a hyena den where carnivores came to eat and feed their young. Hyenas are notorious for being bone collectors and for their tendency to ferociously consume what they scavenge, often leaving behind little more than bone fragments and teeth. Some bones were so destroyed that it was impossible to tell what species they once belonged to. Hyenas also occasionally resorted to cannibalism, as seen by the hyena bones the researchers also found inside the tunnel. Lead study author Matthew Stewart told Gizmodo that the most surprising aspect of the discovery was the sheer amount of bones and their remarkable state of preservation, especially since it's rare to find prehistoric animal remains in Saudi Arabia. He said that Jirsan and similar sites throughout the region most likely contain valuable evidence that can tell more about what the environment looked like through the Holocene epoch. 1. New scorpion species. 19-year-old Harper Forbes and 18-year-old Prakri Jain are avid nature enthusiasts who became friends while working at a nature preserve in California's Mojave Desert. While scrolling through a database of unidentified species one day, they saw a mystery scorpion from their area that had been on record for 6 years. Neither of the men recognized it, despite their familiarity with Soda Lake where it was first spotted. Soon after, they came across another unidentified scorpion seen near Cone Lake that they weren't familiar with. The pair spent their summer break looking for more specimens and taking steps to describe the new species, with help from the California Academy of Sciences arachnology curator, Lauren Esposito. They visited both sites where the scorpions were seen and searched using black lights and by looking in the soil and bushes where scorpions are commonly known to hide. Jain and Forbes were successful in their quest and wrote a paper with Esposito describing Paruroctonus soda and Paruroctonus conclusus as new species found near dry lake beds in central and southern California. They're only found at Soda Lake and Cone Lake, where they've evolved to withstand the high pH levels of the salty environments. Because P. soda's range falls entirely within the Carrizo Plain National Monument, the species is protected. But P. conclusus does not live in a similar area and could be wiped out with the construction of a single solar farm, mine, or housing development, according to Esposito. The paper's authors urged federal authorities to establish a conservation area to protect the newly discovered species. Thanks for watching. Which one of these discoveries do you think were the most interesting? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Bye for now.